All right. Um, this morning, we're going to start off with our little spiritual development part, and then we'll get right back into the lesson plan and just talk about some of those things. Before I forget, I sent an email out, I don't know, a week or so ago about Grace Point Church of the Nazarene needing helpers in caravan. Did I say anything about that? I don't know. Anyway, they need a couple of helpers for a kid with autism, and it's in Shawnee, I think. Yeah, it's in Shawnee, Kansas. So if you're interested in helping out with this kid just on Wednesday nights from 6:15 to 8 o'clock, let me know. I have the contact information. You can use it for community service. So, okay. This morning, spiritual development, we're moving on to we talked about already, to collaboration. Going back to visit collaboration from our information we covered in class, we didn't cover a ton of it, but basically the collaborative point I'm making here with God is, it says, "Come now, let us reason together, says the Lord." Let us reason together, back and forth. Remember that reciprocal action? So it's an interesting verse here, that God would actually take time to listen to our ideas and thoughts. Let us reason together. Though your sins be as scarlet, they'll be white as snow. They're red as crimson, they'll be like wool. So, another good example of God's grace and mercy for us, that He actually takes time to listen to us. Even though we're stupid and we don't know what we're doing, He'll take time to listen to us. So that's my thought for this morning, devotional thought about collaboration. And it's the same thing in the classrooms, collaborating with the constituents you're with when you're teaching. Prayer requests, thoughts? Okay, I'll pray for us. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you so much for these students, and I pray that you continue to watch over them. Help us today learn about lesson planning a little bit more to where we can be effective teachers. And Father, we just want to give you praise for the grace and mercy you've given us. Help us reach out to those around us that need you. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, go ahead and get your lesson plan stuff out again. We're going to go through the template and then hopefully start working on your lesson plan before you get out of here, so you have some things to do. All right? You're welcome. Basically, we got down, for your purposes, we got down to language objectives. We're going to get down to content objectives, to start from context objectives and go on today. I wrote a couple things on the board over here. I don't know if I want to need this anymore. Turn this off. I wrote a couple things on the board over here to differentiate content and language objectives. This is bothering me. I'm really not obsessive compulsive, but that was bothering me. Content objectives are, what do the students need to accomplish in that lesson? Language objectives, how will the students use English in your class? It's pretty simple. This way you differentiate those two. Okay. We talked about the standards. For you elementary people, you're going to be using the Common Core standards. For you secondary people, I have 4 secondary people. You're using the Kansas Department of Education standards for your curriculum. Okay. So then we talked about language objectives a little bit on, was this Wednesday? Monday, about how the students are going to be using it in the class. So they're going to tell, they're going to explain the directions to this quiz to another student in English. So they're practicing using the language. Does that make sense? So if you have a kid that's an ESOL, does it have to be Hispanic? No. That's what so many people assume. Could be somebody from Ethiopia. They're practicing using the language, their second language in English, and so what they're going to do is they're going to use it all the time. So what you want to do is make sure you give them opportunities to do that. Does that make sense? Also, not only practicing using the language speaking, but also using academic language. Because if there's one thing about learning language, is that you can learn to speak and talk to another person in that second language, but you have to also learn how to use academic language that are associated with the content. Okay. All right, content objectives. Let's look at those things. What are you wanting the students to do in relation to the standard that you came up with? Okay. And always, 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 I'm going to tell you this right now. Do not forget this. Always start an objective. The student will. You can put TSW if you want. I don't care. Lots of people do. And a lot of times people put down by the end of the lesson, so by the end of the lesson, the student will, what do you want them to accomplish? 1, how will they show that they've mastered something within relation to the standard that you've given? All right, let's use elementary today. Okay, so we used secondary a little bit last time. So if the topic of your lesson is math, or the subject, the topic is adding 2-digit numbers. Does that make sense? So that would, and the standard would be the Common Core Standard 1-57, adding 2-digit numbers, whatever that is. The objective for that day is by the end of the lesson, the student will add 2-digit numbers with 80% accuracy. Okay? Another one would be to recognize, R-E-C-O-G-N-I-Z-E-S-E. Thank you. Horrible speller. Recognize the steps in adding those numbers. Does that make sense? What's the common thing that I'm using in these sentences? What's the commonality here? It would be these. What do you call those things? Verbs. Thank you very much. Good. So many people forget to put verbs in their objectives. And an objective has to be measurable. Can you measure add? Yeah. Can you watch them do it with 80% accuracy? Yeah, this is measurable here. Recognize the steps in with 100% accuracy. Is that measurable? Yes. Can you tell if they recognize the steps? Yeah, you can put down the steps in jumbled order, and they can put them in order, or they can then, you can watch them actually do their work out on paper and so on, okay? So, objectives must be measurable. So many people make mistakes in saying, by the end of the lesson, students will learn how to. Can you measure learn? And is learn a verb? Yeah, but can you measure that verb? No. Learn is a verb. Yeah, I want to learn how to do that, sure. But for our purposes, we want to put in an active verb that they're going to be doing something. What's some other verbs that can go in these objectives? Develop. Utilize. Very good. PE, demonstrate. Can you use show? Yeah, that's fine. Notice everything objective you're going to do, you're going to include a verb with that. Okay, here's the key question then. For this lesson plan, how many objectives must you have?
4.
So we got 4 now, all right. Anyone?
I thought I remembered you saying 1, but I don't know if that's or something.
That's exactly right. You remember that. You only need 1 objective for that day, right? Typically, in a lesson, you're going to have multiple objectives for that class. But for a class, you typically just need 1 objective, okay? Could your objective for that day for PE be that everybody participates in this game with 100% accuracy? By the end of the lesson, or at the end of the day, students will have participated in the activity with 100% accuracy. Yeah, so they participated. Does that make sense? Content objectives are directly related to your standards. And oftentimes when you're planning a lesson, you really want to start with the objective in mind. Like beginning with the end in mind. Start with the objective, then kind of work your way back. So, and it's a bit easier to do the objective, content objective, than go look for the standard that's associated with that, and then put that in there, okay? Questions about that? We good? All right, assessment plan. I'm going to erase this if everybody's okay with that. What must the assessment directly be tied to? Anyone? What must the assessment be, what must the test be directly tied to? Exam, the quiz, project, the objectives. Thank you, you're thinking. Those assessments must be directly tied to the objectives, okay? So by the end of the lesson, the student will be doing these things with 100% accuracy. The assessment plan then, I'm going to use a specific assessment. So I'm either going to use a formative or a summative assessment. What do you think a summative assessment is if I put sum it up? Give me an example of a summative assessment. You're so talkative. This is the worst class I've ever had in my life. I'll hug you. I'm going to sum up the unit. A summative assessment. Be an exam, right? So your summative assessment in here is going to be what? I'm going to sum up the entire class with what? Presentation. That's our final exam. That's our summative assessment. Good. This is typically for a grade. This is to find out learning amount. Okay? At the end. Typically. End of a class, end of a unit, end of a semester, or whatever. Formative is a snapshot. It's typically not graded. Okay, by the way, I put your exam up on Moodle, exam 1. I've sent you an email this morning right before you got here. So, remember Friday, you don't come to class, you take the exam. Hey, am I in your way? I can't tell you just craning your neck around. Hey, big fat guy, get out of the way. Okay. That's what you wanted to say, wasn't it? Okay. I put your assessment up on Moodle. I should have told you this soon. And I put the instructions. You're going to go through and take the test. It's like multiple choice, true, false, fill in the blank. You go through and take the test without anything. I want you to go through and highlight your answers in green. Does that make sense? It's on a Word document. So as you go through and do that, then I want you to go back and check your answers by taking it again and using your book and notes and stuff, and then highlight the ones you got incorrect in yellow. Remember, what grade are you going to get this exam?
What grade am I going to get this exam?
What's the grade everybody's going to get on this exam?
100.
100%. Very good. Now, I'm giving you 100% for participation, right? It's graded, however, it's not very high stakes. What assessment would this be? Say again? Formative, very good. It's a snapshot. Trying to figure out where you guys are at. And what I did not put on here, this is not high stakes. A formative assessment, you want kids to fail. You want some kids to fail. Because you want to know whether or not they're getting the material. Does that make sense? So most of the times teachers do formative assessments every day, and I do that every time with you guys. I stop and ask you a question. That's a formative assessment. So when you just stare there and look at me, then like, okay, then I got to reteach that, right? And then if somebody answers a question, then I assume, okay, Chris, if you answer the question, I assume everybody else is knowing. Now, granted, should I assume things? No, because what happens when you assume? It makes an ass out of you and me. I just said it on the camera, right? So we cannot assume in class that when you're doing formative assessment that since one person answers it, that everybody's got it. However, at this level, I can, right? I'm hoping. So a formative assessment I'm giving you in your exam, you're going to take it, then you're going to upload it back to Moodle, and then I'll just give you a grade for it. Is that okay with you guys? My goal is not to figure out how much you can cram in your brain and memorize. My goal is to figure out what's the discrepancy between when you did the exam first and second, what are you not getting, okay? So you have two types of assessment, formative and summative. What types of assessment are most often used in class? Which one of these? Most often, especially in college, it's usually summative, right? It all depends. If you're a good teacher, you probably should be using formative most. You should be checking whether or not they're getting material before you move on. So like I said, it's a little snapshot. So after I teach the causes of World War II, I want to make sure everybody's got that. So what I can do is put you all in groups and give you a worksheet, and you can work through that. That's a type of formative assessment. I put you in cooperative groups, right? Then I can see where you got to on that. Formative assessment for PE is simple. Here's a ball, shoot the free throw. All right, now how many times must they shoot it to make sure they have accuracy? That's all up to you, right? If they shoot it once and swish it, is that, let's say I got this kid that's the lankiest, most uncoordinated kid in the entire world, and he falls down when you blow him over, and he can't run and dribble, but you give him the ball and he shoots it and makes it. Is that a good analysis of his skill? Not necessarily. You want to give it 2 or 3 times, right? It's just like anything. When you're doing research, you want to find out the more the better, right? So that may be just a fluke the first time, but the second time, they get up there and shoot it weird, and you may have to correct them a little bit, something like that. Same thing with acting. Let's just use that. That's a good one. So how are you going to read lines and be in conjunction with a partner if you're not doing something, if it says to use emotion there and not use emotion, you go back and try to figure that out. Why are they not doing it, or how can they do it? Okay? So you're going to use in your assessment plan what you want to determine there with your students. Okay? So you determine that, formative or summative. Okay? I would prefer you right now, if you're doing one lesson, probably you're going to do what type of assessment if you're doing one lesson? Formative, right? Because you're not teaching an entire unit to build upon the other things. So you're going to use a formative assessment typically. All right, let's look at integration of literacy and vocabulary. Vocabulary is very simple. It is what you need the students to know. Okay? Now, a little more disclaimer here. This lesson plans you have here, I can go to 1,000 different schools, and you're going to have 1,000 different types of lesson plans. Seriously. This thing is not the same one that all schools use. This is the one that we use here in America. Through our research, we found that these are the things that we think our student teachers need to know and our candidates need to know. And through discussion with principals and administrators, they like our lesson plan, so that's why we use it. Okay? Now, a lot of times in lesson planning, when you're in school, you're just going to have a piece of paper, and it's going to be written down day 1. You're going to write down what you do day 2. You're not going to do all this stuff. So when you are working in practicum, when I come observe you, you'll fill out one of these. When I'm not observing you, I don't really care what you're using. Okay? Does that make sense? So when you're student teaching, you're going to be using these when you're being observed. This will be 3 times. And when you're not being observed, you'll use whatever the teacher's using. They have usually a box says that you fill out day by day. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. That was a little side note. Vocabulary is basically what you want the students to know, what the terms they need to know. This helps you, on one hand, kind of focus on what they need to know in class, so you don't forget something. It also helps your substitute. If you're gone and having diarrhea one day, Lytle, your teacher come in and pick your lesson plan up, use your lesson plan. Okay? All right, integration of literacy. It's almost like language objectives. Almost like language. Notice these things here: reading, writing, speaking, listening, viewing. Those little words can be used also in the language objectives. But for our purposes, how will the students be reading, writing, listening, speaking, viewing, visual representation in class? Do you have to hit all of those things in your lesson? No. The goal is to hit as many as you can. Listening should be an automatic. Because if you have an activity that day and you're explaining it to them, they're automatically listening to your explanation of that activity. So you're going to write that down. But the goal is to hit as many of these as you can. By the way, this is a state thing. This is not a Mid-America thing. The big push is in the last few years is to get these as many as these things in the lesson plan as you can. Okay? Questions about those things yet? We good? Okay, the next thing, materials and technology. If you don't have that, you've got problems. It's just what you're going to use in your classroom. The other big push is technology. Some of you may say, well, I don't have any technology in my classroom. Well, decide what you want to do to put technology in your classroom. If you don't use technology in your classroom, you have to then give a rationale why you did not use technology in the classroom. That make sense? Now, does technology have to be just these things? A computer or a projector? No. What could technology be in PE? They use them all the time. Yeah, music is perfect. Use technology in there, you can use a CD player, that's perfect. They also use heart rate monitors and stuff like that. Have you used them with Brad King yet? Well, I think he's got some heart rate monitors would be one of them too. Yep.
So technology could be as simple like in history as showing like a clip or something?
Absolutely. Showing a clip of this. Showing a clip of a timeline. Yeah, absolutely. An interactive video or interactive website, something like that. That's perfect. Okay. Material signals, differentiation. Notice we're getting to the end of our planning phase. This is our slow, right? Differentiation. You're going to be getting that class coming up, right? But for our purposes, we're going to be looking at how do I differentiate the lesson for the students. If I have a classroom like this, I've got, you 7 people. Is that right? Yeah, my math is wrong. So I got you 7 people in this morning. Not all 7 of you learn the same way. So, and I've used this term before. Some of you know me, the shotgun approach. You guys remember me talking about that? You guys ever seen a shotgun? I know you have. You love the country. Like you're shooting a shotgun. By the way, you don't. You live in the city. My fault. I thought you lived down in Ava, Missouri.
I mean, all my family's from Ava, but
Whatever. Just anybody from Ava is in the country, right? What was that? Oh yeah. I would never use this term in like a public school, but shotgun approach is how I shoot the students all day, right? So shotgun approach, shotgun spreads out, right? So on one day, if I'm shooting a shotgun this way, it hits these students, and it doesn't hit you guys. The next day, I've got to shoot this way, and it hits you guys, but misses them and her. The next day, I may have to just shoot her, because I'm sick and tired of it. Right? Does that make sense? You never, when you're teaching a lesson, you're not hitting everybody typically every day. You got to change your lesson every day to hit all the students. So one day you may be working with the visual learner. So Rachel's back there on her computer looking at Facebook. No, I'm saying she may be a visual learner by typing the notes. All right. Hannah's writing the notes down. So that is also then tactile. So they're doing a couple things here. Right now, college is oftentimes not lent to very many learning styles. It's lecture and then back and forth talking, right? Whereas you get to the classroom, you can't just have lecture. A good teacher, if I were a good teacher, I'd get you guys up and moving, I'd get you cooperating with each other, but I got so much junk to cover, I need to just get it out, right? So, but you want to have kids moving around, you want them listening, you want them speaking, you want them writing, all these things. Notice these things that have listening, speaking, writing, doing. You want to use some of those things for all this differentiation down here below, okay? How will you hit the number of different learning styles in class? Does that make sense? Okay. How many learning styles do you have to hit in class that day? At least one, right?
So you don't have to hit them all then?
The goal is to hit as many as you can. So if you show a video, you've already hit a number of things. If you play a game, you hit a number of things. So, okay? All right, flip over to the next page. Now we're teaching, we're going, man. We're just moving along here. The green. And I want you to write these things down. Introduction. It's very simple. Good morning, class. How are you today? All right, today we're going to talk about, you talk about your subject and topic, right? Very simple. And then today you are going to be able to list the 3 acting phases of Shakespeare. I just made that up. Does that make sense? You're going to tell them the objectives. So you're going to tell them what they're going to be doing. You're going to show them what they're going to be doing. And you're going to tell them or show them what you expect out of them that day. So you tell them, hey, this is what we're doing, and this is what you're going to do, and this is what I want you to do at the end of the lesson. Does that make sense? Did I use an introduction this morning? A short one, very tiny. It was, hey, today we're going to cover this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, right? Sometimes I even put it on the board up here. My suggestion, always put something on the board. So when they come and sit down, they look at that, and it always cements in their head what's going on. I usually do, but when I taught high school, we'd had chalkboards back then, but I'd have a chalkboard, and I'd put it by days. So Monday, talk about what we do, Tuesday, we talk about what we're doing, and so on, so they knew exactly what we're doing all week long. All right, anticipatory set. This is, and it's always been given for me the term of hooking the students into the lesson. So in the introduction, you say, today we're doing this, you're going to be doing this, and to get you interested in this, I'm going to do a video. I'm going to say, all right, if we're going to watch Cause of World War II, but let's watch the very first clip of Midway, the movie or whatever, something like that. Let's watch a few clips of that. So that's an anticipatory set. You can also get them playing a game. All right, let's play a math game, and then we're going to go back and then reinforce that math game. You could give them a quiz, a pre-quiz. A lot of teachers do that. They'll get, okay, this is what we're going to do today, but first of all, I want to give you a quiz and see what you know. So give them a pre-quiz, and then after you teach the lesson, the assessment plan would be to give another formative quiz, the same quiz at the very end of the lesson to see what they learned. Does that make sense? So it all depends what you want to do as the teacher, how you hook them into the lesson. You want to use something that's going to get them in. So I've seen it in a number of different ways. All right, today we're talking about ratios. This is great. And all these kids are, yeah, hey. No, they don't care about that. They care about the M&M candy bag that just got on their table. They're going to do ratios of colors, right? So, okay, before you can do anything, before you can eat these, we're going to do this lesson. And once you finish the lesson, you can eat the M&Ms, whatever. So then they use those M&Ms as the anticipatory set. Okay? Questions about that? Should be very simple. You got to be a good teacher. You got to be creative here in that sense. Okay? Next one. Don't turn it back. No, we're on green. Don't go back. Introduction, modeling, checking for understanding. This is your teaching now. It's like you're in the car. You're driving. You tell them the first part, introduction, anticipatory set. That's getting in the car, checking your mirrors, putting your seatbelt on. Okay? Now we're driving. The instruction, modeling, and checking for understanding. The instruction is exactly what you're going to do step by step in teaching. Okay, first, I am going to review the terms of this. Second, I'm going to put an overhead up on this. Third, I'm going to stop and ask them specific questions about this. Fourth, I'm going to do this. Step by step, you really need to detail that out. It doesn't have to be like complete sentences, because honestly, you don't have room to write that in there. Okay, I'm going to give you another disclaimer here. When you get to sequence 2 and sequence 3, their lesson plan, they're probably going to kill you. This is the way they are. Just because we have so different ways of approaching a lesson plan. I'm a little lighter, some people a little heavier, some, so keep that in mind. When you go to sequence 2 and 3 or your other practicums or other classes, methods, they may just drill you on the lesson plan and say, oh, Neil didn't know what he's doing. I don't really care. This is the way I like to do it. Okay? So keep that in mind. You're going to get some of the same stuff and some not some of the same stuff. Okay. Anyway, so you're driving the car. You're telling step by step of what they're doing, and then modeling is along with that. Math is really easy to model, and so is PE, right? Today we're talking about correctly hitting a tennis ball. So I'm instructing them. Okay, the tennis ball, it bounces. You hit. You got to turn your hand. You got to have it the right angle. All these different things. You're teaching them this the entire time. To backhand, you got to do this. All right, now let me show you how to do it. So somebody hits the ball, you hit it, and you backhand it. Very simple. All right, now let me show you how not to do it. Notice you got to throw in a good example and a bad example. All right, here to hit it, bam, I hit it up there, and it doesn't go straight. To backhand it, I hit it down, and whatever the case. You're showing them bad examples and good examples. So that's modeling. Very simple. Math, modeling. 2 plus 2 is 4. It's very simple. It's easy, all right? Bad modeling is 2 plus 2 is 7. Is that right? No, the kids go nuts, right? So modeling is just showing them the right ways and the wrong ways to do something, okay? Checking for understanding. It's another assessment. It's a formative assessment. I've been doing it all day. All right, tell me what this means. All right, now that we talked about these things, tell me about this. So I could put you in cooperative groups, all right? All right, I want you guys to work on this part of World War II. This group works on this part of World War II. And then I want you to come up with your answers, and we'll come together as a class. Checking for understanding is to figure out What do you know as students or groups of students before I move on to the next topic or lesson? What happens if I move on without doing this? Anyone?
You won't know how to help them later.
Absolutely. I won't know how to help them later. I don't know where I left them behind, right? So I have to know where they're at before I move on. So if everybody pretty much gets the consensus of, yes, I've got this topic, then I can move on. If majority of you don't get that skill or topic, I can then stop and reteach that topic and move on. Oops. That make sense? It's very simple. It's just good teaching. You should be able to do that without even thinking, okay? The next two things in green, guided practice, independent practice. Guided practice is pretty simple. Right? Either when I'm teaching or when I'm wrapping up part of the day, I want to put you in cooperative groups or individually. I may give you a worksheet. I may give you a sheet to start writing and journaling. Something then to practice the skill that we've learned. But it's something that I, as the teacher, am going to help you with. We're going to do guided practices a little bit today when I try to help you with your lesson plan, right? Does that make sense? It's practicing the skill with the teacher helping. Independent practice, what do you think that's called?
Practicing the skill without the teacher.
Absolutely, and typically where is that done? Home, so it's homework, right, typically. So am I going to give you independent practice? Absolutely. So we're going to do guided practice. The person just fell up steps. That'd be awesome. Anyway, guided practice, I'm going to help you with a lesson plan. Try to get some of it done. And then independent practice, I'm going to send you off home. You're going to work on this lesson plan by yourself. Okay? All right, now we're putting the brakes. We're stopping now. That's typically at the end of the lesson. I want to use that practice. Can you stop and do independent practice and guided practice in the middle of the lesson? Sure, you can do it wherever you want, right? But you want to be able to gauge that to where you can move on. What's the goal of independent practice and guided practice?
Successfully being able to do that skill or whatever.
That's absolutely right. You're going to judge whether or not that they've completed that skill, and that's another example of formative assessment. Right? So then we put the brakes on, closure, and then reflection. Closure, please do this. Write this down. Okay, class, today we talked about the objectives, all right? You're going to list the objectives. This is what we learned today. You remember when we did this and we did this? This all relates to this. So you're going to wrap up the lesson by just giving them the objectives, talk about what they did, and then you're going to then wrap up. Say, okay, that's all for today, and then the bell rings and the secondary kids file out, or it turns like 9:30 and then it's recess time for elementary. Right? It's time to go. You have to plan this accordingly, right? Does that make sense? So many people, how many times I've watched people, they get up there, teach, they do a good job teaching, and all of a sudden they just stop and they, okay, I'm done, without doing a closure activity. So make sure you include a closure activity. Plus you look kind of stupid when you just stop and like, okay, what are we doing now? So, self-reflection. Some professors want you to write this in. I honestly would just rather you put these questions down. All right. What went well today? What did the students learn? Lyle, did I ever give you one of these?
No.
Why didn't you ask? I should punch you right in the arm. That's what we were talking about, bro. What went well today? What did they learn? What would I change? That'll cover everybody, because some professors want you to put that in before you teach the lesson. I'm like, how do you do that? But so this will save you from any other hassle. When you get to the other classes, you'll know you'll have those questions down. Okay? This self-reflective piece is part of the state. They want you to do that, being self-reflective teachers or reflective practitioners. So that's our lesson plan template. Okay? So our goal now is to, all right, let's start mapping out a lesson for you guys. Now, when you go on Moodle, this template's on Moodle, it's not color-coded. You're going to hate that. So it's just black and white. But I would like you to use this template and the one on Moodle. You're gonna type the one on Moodle out. You can write on this thing when you wanna plan your lesson right now and then just fill it in on the template. Does that make sense? That make sense? No?
Can you say pencil?
Say that one more time.
What did you say?
She's back there sneezing and snot out of her nose and stuff like that. You're gonna use this to write on, but then you're gonna, if you wanna use it for your lesson plan, then you're gonna use the template on Moodle to actually turn in, okay? I'm gonna give you a week to actually do this thing. So a week from Friday. So not this Friday, but the week from Friday is when this lesson plan is due. You're just gonna upload it to Moodle, okay? All right, so we're gonna spend a few minutes. We got about 10 minutes left. I want you to spend about, I know you can't get to the standards yet, but I want you to spend about 10 minutes thinking about content objectives or thinking about the subject and topic you want to cover and what grade, okay? By the way, did you all get the email about the disposition survey, that link I gave you? Did you take it? Yeah, if I can send out the link again, there's a link that you fill out for our data collection, so did you take it? See, unlike some people, Rachel, yeah, if you guys would take that for me, it'd be great, okay? All right, let's start working on this. Let's work on getting some subject, topic, and grade out, and then maybe some objectives. Go. Dang it. Am I a nerd? I got a little thing here that holds my,
No?
somebody gave me that. Isn't that awesome?
So we need to just for your markers.
Uh-huh. Well, they gave it to me with markers.
Oh,
Is it this little?
I've never seen this before.
Oh, yeah. That would have been a great class. I did it.
I used the markers in here and never very good.
I think.
I think the revolutionary work is my favorite thing to teach.
Would it be bad for you guys to work on this together? No, I don't really care. If you want to bounce ideas off each other, use the same topic, and then I don't care. As long as you're doing your own work, I'm good.
I did that survey.
You did?
I said
So this is like
the.
That would be like specific what?
One word.
Yeah, I think you're right. Or we can ask.
Yes?
So for here, subject, is it history and then your specific topic?
That's
Or-
correct, yeah. You can do history or social studies, or, and then topic within those.
Okay.
That's it. It's very simple. Question?
Are we doing?
You're working on your, excuse me. This is awkward. You're working on your lesson plan. So if you want to pull up that lesson plan from Moodle, the template,
Just pick any.
yeah, it's a fake lesson plan, you're gonna work it. But remember, what do you have to use specifically for this class to plan this lesson? Standards, but what did we talk about before we talked about the lesson plan? The IEP. You gotta remember, you gotta incorporate the IEP into this lesson plan. Remember your objectives for Danny? Danny's in 7th grade. You're gonna have content objectives, but you're also gonna have objectives for Danny too, okay? So, simple for that would be make sure Danny turns into work 75% of the time. Does that make sense?
Where does that go on?
So
Under
this is
content objectives is
grade
fine.
7 then?
Yes. But if you wanted, typically you would go other than doing 75% of the work and him doing 75% of the work, you'd find the other objective like decoding words, sight words and stuff like that. So you may have, in history, you may have a word bank that you use for definitions. You want to make sure he learns about 4 or 5 of those specific words. These are the ones I really want him to learn.
So outside of making like objectives for the whole class, you also just want individual ones
For Danny, yeah. So you may have, let's say you come up with 2 objectives for the whole class, and then right underneath you have Danny. Okay, by the end of the lesson, Danny will, yeah.
Topic and concepts, is Revolutionary War enough, or do we need to list specific concepts within that Revolutionary?
You put, okay, if you history, Revolutionary War, and then how would you like, if you had an outline, what would be underneath you were gonna cover? So, you want it to be causes, you wanna have, the players, the generals, however you wanna do it.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be all of them, you can just put.
It just put some of those in here.
Yeah, yeah. Cause you wanna do that, it's just like making an outline. These are the things I wanna cover about the Revolutionary War today.
Okay.
Cause this would be like one day lesson. The next day you wanna cover the other parts of the Revolutionary War, and the next day and so on, so.
Okay.
So I'm assuming the Revolutionary War is an entire unit, so. absolutely. So you said, okay, your today's lessons, language arts, but parts of a story, it's, absolutely. Cause that'll be a Common Core standard, identifying parts of stories, you know, beginning, end, and conclusion and stuff like that, or beginning and conclusion. Yeah, that's fine.
I started making
You can make whatever
to
you
teach
want.
Yeah.
yesterday, so just
PE is so easy to plan.
I don't.
So subject PE, the topic today was like, it is a lot. However, the state looks at these things and they want you to be able to do the entire thing. So the goal is to pick if it could be physical education or health. That's right, the sport or the activity. Yeah. The key in PE is always, PE people always feel like they're detached because they're focused so much a lot of, elementary. Yeah, absolutely. And the goal is how can you incorporate reading in your, that's a big thing. How can you incorporate reading in your PE class? And you can. So you can bring a book out and you can have them work in groups and books with books or
I don't know, I've never,
journaling.
in my PE, like, we never did any of those books or
Yeah.
anything, we just, here you go.
You might, yeah, I know, that's the big push, the state is pushing PE people to do these things, so. You might keep a fitness journal, you know, today we're gonna get our heart rate up to that, and today, you know, all these different things, so.
So the
Because we're in California, we're
improvers.
I don't know, if you go to Alabama, there's a bunch.
So I think my question is actually, we kind of follow my outline. Students will, so it has to be something measurable, that's the hard part. But then this lesson, the students will be
well, I think
able to
I'm
identify
doing it for
the causes of the revolutionary war. I think that's, is that measurable?
Yeah, absolutely. You might put in, okay, might be able to identify 4 causes.
Okay.
That way you can measure that
Specific number,
Absolutely.
okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It's just a bit easier for you.
It was like given to us last week.
Yeah.
Or language instruction,
Kind of
objectives.
events and stuff preceding, leading up to
You
it.
could do,
Yeah.
like, could I do like,
It's something that, yeah.
you could do like call for the mall.
Yeah, absolutely, that's good. Yeah, because if you have specific lingo you use in like
Yeah.
softball, yeah, or basketball or whatever, they have to be able to use it in English to put
Yes.
Spanish, so, yeah, or whatever it is. Yes, sir.
I have like my topic and concepts and a little outline for life before,
So
so
this is
it's
it.
like background and then causes. And my objectives, that's almost like the same.
Yeah, so,
Just combine them.
the objectives would be, by the end of the lesson, students will list the causes. They will, or list 3 causes of
And there's like,
the Civil War, and then they will list 4 prominent leaders of the sort. That makes sense? So,
there's like goal 1.
so that, yeah, it's all tied together. It's kind of redundant sometimes, but yes, it's all tied together.
Goal 2, goal 3. So you have to be,
Yes,
just
ma'am.
pick one
Yes.
of those goals.
On this, does this have to be something that the children learn?
I think so.
No, not necessarily. It could be writing down the
Or
instructions.
just make sure that you incorporate.
So if my
it
whole
into the
lesson
lesson.
is about reading and writing,
Mhm.
what specifically would it be?
Here you could say, okay, at the end of the lesson, Juan will describe the